All right. And we'll get this going back over here. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Please eat more pizza than you guys did last time. I ended up carrying a whole lot home. This is the Dallas Salesforce user group, and we are joined tonight by Mr. Vernon Keenan to talk about how not to hate your DevOps. We will super quick. Would you make sure, would you give her the mic, please? She's got a slide coming up here.
Thank
So hopefully everybody's in the right place. This is who we are running the group, always open for suggestions and any kind of ideas. So please reach out to us. That's Moyez and I's contact information. So you can grab a hold of us anytime and let us know if you've got some ideas. I was bragging about how great a job this is. If I think of something that I want to learn, I go find somebody smart and I sucker them into coming and giving us a session. So getting to pick my own continuing education, or this may be more stress and venting about the work we have to do in DevOps that I just don't understand all the whys. So anyway, it's fantastic, but if you've got any ideas, love to hear them. New and newsworthy. So Renee, thank you. You've got the
Yeah.
microphone. You talk us through this. I've only got one thing to add after you're done.
Awesome. Can you hear me? Yeah, I hope so.
Okay.
So on June 12th, Salesforce introduced multiple new AI products, AI Cloud and Einstein Trust Layer. Einstein Trust Layer is intended to provide the benefits of generative AI while ensuring data privacy and security are maintained. And the Salesforce AI Cloud is open and customizable. In their own words, the Einstein GPT Trust Layer will help prevent large language models from retaining sensitive customer data. The separation of sensitive data from the large language models will help customers maintain data governance controls while still leveraging the immense potential of generative AI. Their AI cloud will allow for use of both Salesforce and third-party large language models, in addition to bring your own models, what they're calling BYOM. This is also bringing generative AI to all products with Sales GPT, Service GPT, Marketing GPT, Commerce GPT, all the GPTs. And prompt templates and builders, which are slightly separate from the Apex GPT. To give some dates for this, the Einstein GPT Trust Layer will generally be available in June 2023, along with Service GPT. And Sales GPT is in pilot today and will be generally available in July 2023. Marketing GPT will be in pilot in June 2023 and generally available in February 2024. And the Commerce GPT is in pilot today and will be generally available in July as well. Apex GPT will be in pilot in June 2023. Flow GPT will be in pilot in October 2023. I'm really excited for that one. I think it's going to be very cool.
Yes.
Very excited. Slack GPT is in beta today and will be generally available later this year. And Tableau GPT will be in pilot in November 2023. And Paul, you said there's something you want to add?
That's great. Yeah, no, there's another, how many of you guys have gone through the enhanced domain struggle over the past year? They kind of did a forced rollout of enhanced domain, which changed some of the URL structures. So if you got hacky with your code, which everybody does after about a year of doing customization in Salesforce, you start relying on the URLs to be the same thing every day. Enhanced domains caused some changes to the domain structure. So reformulated the way URLs and redirects happen inside of Salesforce. The Salesforce Edge Network is a CDN, which a caching layer that tries to do geographically local, low latency routing of stored files like images or anything like that. So your one server from your pod is doing the compute, but it's referencing and letting you bring in images from a near neighbor version or copy of the data. So it distributes out copies of your images to these CDN edge computers, and you get a mixed response back from Salesforce. You get the very small HTML packet, and all the big higher latency images and other loads like that come from something that's hopefully a lot closer to you. So keeps you real time, but also gives you caching for stuff that can be cached. So it's neat. It's a small piece of functionality. I actually, one of my corrections in my book, because I mentioned this as one of the things that I didn't see as an enterprise capability inside of Salesforce. And somebody said, no, they've got one of those. I had to go back and rewrite a chapter, and I didn't have a big zinger of this is a cool thing that they don't do, but they do. So that's out there. They are doing a bit of domain name and URL reconfiguring inside of Salesforce. So some of your URLs may change. Some of your network hops may change. So if you've got really tightly bound IP address restrictions, you know, connected to VPNs and pad IPs, you may have to be ready to go reconfigure those. There'll be a new set of IPs that will live under the salesforce.com domain, because you'll be getting your traffic from main server plus also from edge server to pull together to do one web page. Cool feature. You probably, not many people are really using it unless you know you have a multinational audience and you're distributed, but the upgrade will be enforced eventually for everybody. So you can opt in now and headache yourself, but somewhere down the road, you will have to deal with whatever headache comes with this. I'm hoping it'll be small. I'm hoping it's not as big of a headache as enhanced domains. It'll be fewer changes, but it's out there. Know that it's coming, and it's probably a good idea to start planning network stuff now.
Is that new?
Well,
It's not a new product, but the announcement was like a week ago that they were rolling that out, enforced eventually, and it was an opt-in kind of starting now. You could buy into it and pay for it before, but
Well, I didn't see the notice. I assumed it was.
okay, yep, yeah, that's the one.
well,
Mhm.
you don't.
It has been around. It's just being rolled into. You could buy into it, and it was like an Akamai is the big player in the CDN space. So you could Akamize all of your content. Salesforce had well, if that's something you need, we have our version of Akamai, and you just roll that in. Well, now they're baking it in native to the platform. As an option, you can turn it on, but eventually and then you'd have to go through that, but eventually that'll be enforced and rolled out, and everybody's org will be configured to be able to use the CDN. You had a question, Renee?
This is not the same as Hyperforce.
It is not the same as Hyperforce. Hyperforce has been kind of deflated, where it's just your Salesforce, instead of running on Salesforce's servers, the Salesforce's code is running on Salesforce's servers. It's in Salesforce's hosting system. Hyperforce is, okay, that code is now running in AWS containers. You don't know the difference really. You're just aware that that switch has happened, and it's allowing you a couple other config options, because Amazon has more regional co-locations to host from. You can say, if we possibly cut off by an earthquake, I want to make sure that my data is in California and in somewhere else, so that if California is cut off from the rest of the country, I have a failover zone, a redundancy zone in 2 different parts of the country, because I think my traffic could be suspect, and I want to make sure we're resilient based on that possible break. Like Texas has its electricity thing. We don't have redundancy. Salesforce doesn't have as much redundancy, and they never had the option to just say, I want to be in at least these 2 because I think this could go down. Or I'm okay just being in this one and only charge me for using this one. But that's what Hyperforce did. The CDN stuff is kind of similar in that it's network distributed networking, but it's probably also using AWS and just instead of putting your whole compute, all of your Salesforce org, it's using those same Amazon resources just to hold a cache for your images. And then it can make cool URLs to bring the images in from that local server to the user, not just the available one in case an outage happens or a break in the connection across the country.
you.
You're welcome. Ah.
That's very helpful. It really was.
No, we don't talk cost. Cost is always flexible. Depends on how big you are and how much they think you can afford, or how much you want it. It's I don't even. It's a dark art. I stay away from numbers and dollar signs. So we're always looking for stack champions. Renee is our most recent initiate and taking over the machine learning and AI portion, bringing ideas to our group for that. So as you saw from the news, thank you, Renee. Ecosystem news, if you see something interesting and would like to share it, I'm happy to replay it and be able to talk about it. Nathan Schulman is our LWC and developer expert of the developers. He's not here tonight. He's at another concert. That guy has been going crazy with the concert.
I'm here.
Ah, what?
I heard that.
How did you get in? Who made you a panelist?
I think the concert I told you about was in October. I was just telling you as early as I could. They always schedule concerts the same night. It's not my fault. But sorry I'm late. I was busy getting a compliment about how I was a good developer at a customer when I was at Accenture.
Damn it, he heard that. All right. So please, somebody else volunteer. Now Nathan's going to have a big head. So we're still looking for integration experts to bring it in platform dev, like basically kind of the admin side of dev or admin developer. Would love to have. We had Steve Mollis on one time, and that was a fantastic session about how much code he could do with just formulas, like how much functionality he could build out of a formula. Fantastic resource. And if you, I always love to deflect developer work into config because the path through DevOps is usually much faster for config stuff. So I always save a lot of administrative time by doing stuff in platform as opposed to going to code. I'm wearing the hat for the flow champion. So, and then we may have to find a new security expert. I think Waqas is bathing in money now with his acquisition. So we may not see him for a bit, but hopefully
Well, they got acquired?
Huh?
They got acquired?
I believe so.
I don't think that's been announced, so I haven't heard of that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
By who?
I haven't
Capado?
heard anything official either. I smell news and suspect.
Capado?
I would guess. That would be my guess. I do not have any detail on that at all. And I've worked fairly closely with Capado in the past, so I don't know.
Lips are sealed. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving
You
forward.
heard the part where I'm recording, right? And this is going to be on YouTube, so don't ask me questions that I can't answer. I don't want to have to spend the time go back and edit the stuff out. But yeah,
You have
no,
no idea
I
what's
don't know.
going
It's
on
just from his
with
just
DigitSec.
outside things that are public to everybody. I have my suspicions. So, but Waqas was great. He did some good demos of hacking and hijacking that helped me understand the back ends of Salesforce and community even a little better. So, but if anybody else wants to wear those hats and bring those topics in, I would love to have a group of people just injecting those pieces of information, kind of running traps on that, you know, kind of like Nathan does all the time. Replacement. Anyway. So thank you, and let me know if anybody's interested in doing that. I do not have our Twitter hashtag, but if you take any snapshots of the meeting, please tag Salesforce Devs and Dallas Ohana. Feel free to follow or connect with any of us on Twitter. Lars, Jade is our big military proponent, a good buddy of mine. She shows up here from every so often from all the way from Boston. So myself and Moyez, lots of good stuff going on. But yeah, if you tweet, please tag us. And hand it over to you, Moyez, for the Moyez Minute. What is new with you, sir?
Couple of things. One is Dreamforce has been announced. You can buy your tickets. It's open. Salesforce.com/Dreamforce. The dates are September 12th through 14th. I think we're keeping it reasonably small The new model since COVID has been away from one central Dreamforce with lots and lots of people to more regional Salesforces. But this one is the one in San Francisco. What we know as a traditional Dreamforce is September 12th through 14. They didn't pick up a lot of speakers that I know of from our call for speakers. I had a couple of sessions I presented, and they responded, "Hey, you're the old guy, right? We don't really want to hear what you have to say." So I won't be speaking this year unless things change. But I will be there. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun. So I think ticket prices are discounted by about $800, which is still expensive. I don't know what that makes it. But yeah, so that's been.
How many years have you presented there, Moyez?
Well, I don't know, 6-7 years. Until COVID, we used to present, like all of us used to present every year, and then COVID hit, and then since COVID, I haven't presented at all. So last year I didn't present. This year doesn't look like I'll present. There's a couple that individual teams are still kind of open about. But yeah, it was wonderful the first couple of years, a great novelty, and I enjoyed all the extra perks. And now the prep work is like, oh man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But in any case, leave room for some of the younger guys, some of the newer guys to present. The other thing I want to talk very briefly about is the stand-up for next year is the nominations are open. It's on my website, t.digital/standup. If you go to that URL,
throw that in there. I saw Sarah post about that, so looking forward to it. I'm excited to add the CTA component into that. I think that'll be exciting. I've got to go do some favors to get some favors inside of Accenture.
Okay.
Grab some CTA interest, but I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. So if you want to nominate a charity, you can do that at t.digital//standup, and there's a nominate an organization. So I'm hoping that we are able to do more than one organization next year. But please, if you have an organization that's worthy, that you feel like can use our type of help, it's totally free to the organization, right? Salesforce provides the licenses, and the Dallas devs provide the intelligence, as does the UTD Salesforce student group. My company underwrites the expenses, and we're just it's wonderful. We're happy to do it, and it's just a tremendous weekend. If you've done it before, you know how much fun they are. So nominations are open. And
thank you for all you do that. I know that it's a lot of personal expense, company expense, and time with you and family commitment. So it's great to be a part of that. So thank you for that. If I've never said thank you before. No,
it's a lot of fun, and hopefully we do it forever. It's just wonderful. So back to you.
Okay, well, great. All right, so next month, I have a couple feelers out, and we are either going to do, I think we have the option, I just haven't locked it in. I will take votes into consideration, but we will either have an Einstein GPT session. I will try and get Stefan Chandler Garcia. He'd promised to talk to us around this time frame. If he can now talk about Einstein, he was under lots of do not discuss yet stuff. So hopefully he's past that, and we can trick him into showing up and helping us with Einstein GPT, or we will do an invocable methods session and try and teach how to use Apex inside of flows. So it should be interesting to Flow developers and Apex developers as well. And we'll try and get Eric Smith to come back and participate with that again. So, you know, that guy who wrote all of the stuff that's on Unofficial SF. So those should be one of those two will be our session for next month. So I'll send the invites after I have it locked down. All right. So I've known Vernon for about, gosh, what's it been, 2 or 3 years now?
Yep.
And we talked when I was working for a company, when my boss was based out of Seattle. I think they were based out of Michigan, but it was very COVID decentralized. So have known Vernon. Vernon's been building up his network and brand and the helping with the science of DevOps. So I told him I hate DevOps, and Renee and I were having a venting session about bad DevOps. And I thought, you know what, we ought to have somebody come and dispel that. There's got to be a good reason for that, or some way that we can go through and say, we shouldn't be doing this because that guy said that it doesn't make sense. So, or based on the building block heuristics, we should be doing this and not that. So, Vernon, I'm sorry to set those expectations so high, but if you want to give your qualifications and just take your screen share whenever you like.
Okay, I'm ready. I got it. Screen one. Are we there?
We're there.
We're showing it.
If you see my camera, you should be able to see what I'm seeing. So that should be instant feedback.
I'm good. Okay, so everybody, hey, let's make it interactive. You're welcome to kind of jump in as I go through this stuff. Thank you for inviting me. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem since 1999 when I started out as a consultant for Salesforce, and that was a transition from when I used to work at Oracle for Mark Benioff. So I am old. I am old. So I've been around, and the thing about me and the platform is that I use it as a business tool for myself. Ever since about 2012, I started working on the platform to make it a business, like an ERP type system for my own business, which is a telecommunications company in the Bay Area called Telnexus. So I've been using it for telecom billing for the last 10 years or so. So I've been using it. And then the way I got into DevOps is I tried to take what was going on in Salesforce and the taxing system I had, and I tried to scale it out to a real environment. And it didn't work because of all the governor limits and all the storage costs, and the platform is slow for that kind of thing. So I spent about 2 years getting into the real cloud native world, so to speak, meaning building cloud native applications in Go, using Kubernetes to run them in a cluster. And then DevOps is like a binding force that goes between them. So that's when I started to learn about DevOps, the regular DevOps, and then I look back at ourselves in Salesforce DevOps and I go, wow, there is no Salesforce DevOps. We're really terrible at that. There's like no system. There's no, we started doing code storage back in 2017. So that's a really, really late start. So I think part of my theme, and you're going to see this, is that I think that we should be looking at what's going on in regular DevOps and maybe copying some of those things. But Salesforce DevOps is special. And I think Paul's got a point there when it comes to, when should you be spending money on DevOps? When should you be doing it? I think there is a threshold, and we're going to talk about that. So the first thing I'd like to discuss here is that basically a Salesforce DevOps platform, and here I'm talking about AutoRabbit, Blue Canvas, Capado, GearSet, Prodly, Opsera, and I think I got them all. And all of those companies are essentially is they're putting out a SaaS system that's managing your SaaS system. I mean, that's how complex things are now. And that's something we have to appreciate, is that if you're doing a lot of work in Salesforce, you might need a tool like tool like DevOps to kind of keep track of all the stuff you're doing. And that's where you need to step it up and have a whole nother SaaS system that's able to manage your SaaS system. So why do we need this? Well, here's a key insight, I think, is that, and I'm sure everybody who's an architect or a developer has experienced this, right? You have your change sets, you got whatever, you know, you're doing an org deployment, you've got some sort of simple thing set up, and then you go to, it all worked in the sandbox, but then, you know, you apply it to the production org in a release and it fails. So what am I doing? How do I fix that? Well, it turns out to fix that is a really gigantic effort. And that's why we have these 7 companies I mentioned. Is that essentially what they need to do is they have to model your Salesforce org in another computer program. And this is kind of like creating a digital twin. You might have heard of the term digital twin, where you're like you have a building and you create a digital twin of the building so you can like simulate changing things in the building to see if you save money with energy costs, for example. So we kind of do the same thing with a digital twin in Salesforce metadata. We suck the whole thing into a graph database that's a little bit more efficient than just sending it to Salesforce repeatedly to try to figure out your errors. That supposedly this twin, which has been reading metadata continuously from the Salesforce org you're trying to deploy to, can simulate a release management run. And that can help you anticipate what's going to go wrong in your deployments. So I think this is one of the signals that you might need DevOps, is that if you are having a lot of trouble syncing up your metadata or syncing up your org status between your sandbox orgs and your production orgs, so that you get into this problematic loop that I'm talking about, then I think you might be looking at DevOps. You might need DevOps.
Now,
Another reason.
I'm sorry,
ahead.
Vern, the digital twin concept, you might want to go into that a little bit. And I may furrow my brow at you for calling a digital twin of a digital system a digital twin.
Yep.
I think we just called
Yep.
that a copy in my day. But yeah, the digital twin was usually creating a digital model based on telemetry from actual physical systems.
Exactly.
And then we're talking about actually digitally twinning systems so that you can do change and deltas and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the same idea, and it's giving up the fact that the Salesforce metadata hairball is somewhat indeterminate.
So a sandbox is digital.
Well, so when I learned about the digital twin concept at a Gartner EA, digital twin was, if you want, you built a virtual model, a 3D model of an engine. And based on temperature sensors and RPM sensors and heat and feedback from the computer, you could show digitally what was happening in the physical real world. So you were creating something that was kind of real-time synced back and forth. If you're talking about the performance of your stores, hey, why have these 3 stores all of a sudden gone dark? This is a digital twin, a virtual image of all of my physical assets. So that was the context that I heard digital twinning of, that you just be able to see and represent stuff with a little bit more. You have when the HTML, whenever you said this is a drop down and that's to switch this on and off, when it became more like looked like a real switch, and a light switch is now what they look like, that's more of a digital twin. If that virtual light switch controls a light switch and it knows when it's on and off, that's kind of a digital twin, and how it was originally explained to me. But my
So my
preference might
analogy
be different.
is,
Yeah.
my analogy is you've got an admin who makes a change to, a pick list, and all of a sudden that change makes a deployment invalid. The digital twin concept allows for the Salesforce DevOps platform to it scans the org ahead of time, like every night.
Okay.
And then it'll update its own metadata model inside of itself, allowing it to do a pre-flight check, is another term that's around this, to simulate the org deployment within its own database that's separate from Salesforce. And the reason why I think this is a capitulation somewhat and saying that you can't really recreate a Salesforce database or a Salesforce environment from scratch, I think we would all agree on that, is you can't actually dump out all the metadata from an org and faithfully reproduce that org from that data. There's inevitably, manual steps involved and other things that kind of really complicate the whole Salesforce development process. I think we can all agree that this is a core complication. And what these DevOps platforms do is they do other things besides just making sure that you can do a release okay. When you get Elements Cloud is the best example of this. They ingest all your metadata, create a digital twin, and then they're able to do something called change intelligence. So that if you want to change something, it'll tell you about every other element inside the metadata universe that'll be affected. And there's no native way in Salesforce to do that. And the only way that they can do that is because they have a graph database that connects everything that's separate from the actual metadata store. So I think if you look at the successful companies, Capado, AutoRabbit, GearSet, they all have this kind of digital twin capability to varying degrees.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I just had never considered the digital part of a digital twin means that there's something not digital that you're twinning, but why can't that be a digital system? Yeah.
The state is not deterministic in a Salesforce org. It's always changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, makes sense. Just folded my brain a little bit.
No, I appreciated that discussion. Somebody else got a comment on that wonderful insight? So I think, what is Salesforce DevOps, practically speaking? It's basically, depending on the size of your organization, you need to have solutions or abilities to communicate in all 11 of these categories I've got on the screen here. And I stacked them up also what I think is how common it is to use a tool that I'm talking about there, and how versus, you go up the stack here, basically that you have to be a bigger organization in order to need some of these things. So I can just go through this briefly because it's illustrative. I mean, basically source code management, I think, is still a base level thing. If you've got teams that are working on code that needs to get sent to the org, it's usually better to have some sort of branch-based tracking mechanism in there. I think it's also important to realize that, like we were just discussing, it's hard to get a source of truth from your Salesforce org in terms of code. I think it's unfortunate we use that term. I actually would rather call the things we're making that go into repositories change artifacts, because that's the thing that we start moving around all over the place. You create a change artifact that you want to validate through your sandbox, validate through QA or some other testing orgs, and then you want to deploy it into your org. So I kind of prefer the term.
Yeah, I'm using that tomorrow.
Yeah.
I like that too. Yeah, I get caught up on the telling people we're doing code migration, and it's config. But it's config,
Yeah,
converted down to a type of code, and change artifact. Love it.
Change artifact is good. It also kind of says, well, by the way, this XML stuff, it's almost impossible to do a pull request with it, so we're not really going to treat it like code, because it is. I mean, have you ever done pull requests? I guess you have, probably.
Yeah.
You were telling me about that, how terrible that is. That's one of the reasons why Paul hates DevOps. Is that correct?
I got the chance to reorder a bunch of stories into more proper pull request optimized timelines. So I'm still riding that high that I think I may have turned 2 months worth of story execution into 3 stories with technical tasks already outlined. And my project may be a lot more fun. I will have less DevOps overhead because I optimized the project plan based on the DevOps process.
You know, that comment reminds me that something I should have mentioned in the first place is DevOps is less technology and more management, really. And when I hear about people complaining about the DevOps culture, I kind of attribute that sometimes to poor leadership and poor management. Because if you can lead a lot with these ideas because they're practical. And I also think you can always, we're going to get to it in a minute, but I think we need more scientific processes in our work so we can kind of measure what we're doing and understand, you know, what you're doing on a mass scale, especially if you're in a big team. So let's just kind of roll up the stack real quick here. I think when I talk about DevOps, developer and low-code tools, I'm really talking about things like SFDX and things of that nature. Pipeline orchestration, I think, I guess there's a lot of Azure DevOps out there. People are doing that and writing code. I guess there's still a lot of Jenkins out there. So this is a lot of people are spending a lot of time managing the pipeline. Capado and GearSet will give you kind of a pipeline thing. This is where DevOps Center fits in. It's a tool that gives you a golden path through DevOps. By the way, if you go off the golden path, you'll probably be eaten by a lion, but we can talk about that later. But it's, you know, pipeline orchestration is a key thing. The next thing I'd like to, this is something that we don't do. We generally don't observe what actually happens in our orgs once we deploy them. This is one thing where there's a glaring deficiency between what goes on in JavaScript world and what's going on in Salesforce world, where like I can easily detect the journey of a user, for example, through an application. And I think you could get a lot of insight and a lot of opportunity to improve your app if we had something similar to that in Salesforce. And, you know, we're way off from that kind of thing. The only thing that we have in this field right here is kind of like the SRE stuff, like Pharos has got an observability product to do to log errors so that you can deal with the errors a little bit more intelligently. So I think, and then we start getting into these green layers, which are really the management layers. And I think this is where people typically stop nowadays on the DevOps journey. And this is kind of why I think we're not done yet. This is basically the JIRA level, to put a handle on it. This is where you're taking your planning and you're interfacing with your business teams and you're dealing out stories and you know, epics and stories and tasks associated with them. So this is where the workflow is, where you've got all the people working together to try to make the thing work. And then up above that, I think the big question that I have, and I want to understand more about this, is how developers and people feel when they're doing DevOps or doing application delivery. I mean, do you know why you're doing it? I mean, do you understand why you're taking this step? Do you understand, like, if you're working for the Red Cross, is this going to save more people? You know, is there some sort of enterprise KPI that I'm actually helping here?
Yeah, I'm really hoping for the Rosetta Stone in here of this process that you have to go through in a long page form, or filling this out, or checking this box, or scanning this code or this change artifact helps or lends to this particular corporate goal. And if you don't have that, and it's my pet peeve, is the difference between habits and process. And I'm trying to coin that kind of phrase. You do stuff because we've always done that. That's a habit. If you do that, we're connected to telemetry, and hey, we don't need to do this anymore. The thing that you're doing is now automated, but we still have the habit of making everybody do this. Or I came from a different organization and we always did full regression testing before we went to production. Well, we have one developer here. We don't need to do full regression testing. That's just doubling the work and providing the telemetry on that should be that grants you zero benefit, and you should adapt your process to your resource pool and a lot of other things. And that's what I'm really hoping to get your perspective on, is how do we assess and communicate or appreciate what it is doing in each of those steps. So,
I think I wish I could, give some definitive advice on that, but I think it's a little bit of the dark jungle, if you will, of this field right now. I think there's a couple issues with it. One is, as marketers or a publisher in this space, like I can tell where the interest lies, how interested people are in various topics. And I've heard it from other publishers as well, that there's very little interest in value stream management. And I think so to me, there's a big challenge there, to kind of, hack your way through the dark forest and, find some enlightenment is to how do we make that connection between the traditional value stream process, which really hasn't changed since 1960, honestly, as it was invented by Toyota. So where I'm referring to the Toyota Katya here and all that stuff. And you still need to get everybody in a room. You still need to put all the boxes on the wall. You still need to, spend $1 million on all the people that day being in the room. But you get a lot of people who go, oh, that's what you do. Oh, that's why I have to do this. Oh, here's why we're screwing up this process, is because, it's gated at this location because this other process is stuck or something. And to be able to see those things, I think it's still a grand challenge, honestly, for IT products. I would hope there are, and this is another reason why I like cloud native DevOps as opposed as a model for us in Salesforce DevOps. You look at a company like digital.ai, and they're on a mission to kind of make a bunch of acquisitions and put kind of an AI backbone, if you will, along all these things to try to get alignment with IT. But I think, you've identified, and I think you said it well there, Paul, what some of the problems are in this. I think the other problem that threatens sales, honestly, I think that this is a threat to Salesforce in general. Eventually, people are going to wonder why you're spending $5 million a year on Salesforce for what? I'm sure that question's been asked a million times.
I hope so. It's nobody's a charity. Everything that you spend money on should be well documented and lead to the bottom line somewhere, be supporting some mission goal. So yeah, the analysis of it versus the have all companies do that. Well, no, but all companies have a different reason for doing that.
So I'll move on to the next topic here. I think let's think about what is DevOps good for. And I would actually add to this, the number one thing Salesforce DevOps is good for is to help you manage an extraordinarily complex installation that usually has got a bunch of very large, very expensive app exchange packages in it. So things like ERP packages, things like Encino, things like Viva, and especially those last two I mentioned are in regulated industries. So anytime you're I got a buddy who's up at Blue Cross and he's got 10,000 users doing healthcare data. So those are good reasons to put in DevOps, because DevOps gives you rigor. It gives you a lot of rigor, makes your processes well defined, And also, I think it's this next point, first point on the slide here. And I think this is really a primary point that's kind of like a corollary, is that what DevOps platforms are SaaS systems that manage other SaaS systems. And what's the basic thing a SaaS system lets you do? It lets a bunch of people get together and work together on a problem in a coordinated way. And I think that in a big company, you might have a lot of people trying different things with Salesforce DevOps. So you may be able to, by having investing in a DevOps platform, or maybe investing in your own DevOps tools or something, you could have like a platform initiative in your bigger company where you're able to give your developer teams the tools they need, so they're not casting about looking for tools. So I think that's a practical thing about DevOps. I think that the next 2 points, build better apps faster. It's kind of like my quip. What is Salesforce DevOps good for? Well, it helps you build better apps faster. And why is that? Well, it kind of refers to the underlying aspect of DevOps, is that you should be paying attention to the time you're spending on things. We talk about the DORA metrics and the time to delivery, the failure rates and so forth, that you can actually measure. You got to be careful about that when you're measuring your metrics, that you just don't measure things for measuring sake, but to have some way to measure your success and to be able to report success amongst your other teams, maybe to find teams that need more help, is critical. It's like, how can you not do something like that? You have to be able to have some sort of feedback loop that works. And we're also fortunate in the DevOps world to be research rich. There's the DORA group, like I mentioned, and others, the CNCF, and other groups that have put together research that shows, and this is all self-reporting data, of course, but those groups that report higher productivity and that DevOps matters for them is that they measure their results and they use those feedback, that data to give them feedback. And over time, we've seen improvement. Over time, we've also seen improvement stalling lately. So that's another thing. But I don't think we're in that phase yet for Salesforce. And I think also, if you have this platform-oriented vision where you are create a better developer experience, where developers have to make fewer decisions, they have pipelines that work, they're able to set off deployments and do something else, have as much automation as possible. This is going to improve your developer experience, and I think is going to help in that regard. So just talk some more here about the state of Salesforce DevOps. We're still in the early days. Like I mentioned, we didn't get started with DevOps in Salesforce until 2017. And DevOps as an idea got started in 2009 and really got rolling about 2011. And by 2015, the word DevOps engineer was a going title. And by that became a Salesforce DevOps engineer, became a going title around the year 2020. And then, in 2021 is when we saw these emergence of these platform companies. But honestly, most of the focus has been on release management. So I like to say that Salesforce DevOps is more than release management. And you need to look at that whole stack that I referred to earlier in order to start reaching for that ideal that Paul and I were talking about earlier, about knowing why you're doing something in an organization. IT alignment. We need to get that IT alignment going. I think also in Salesforce, it's a obvious failing is we have no idea what users are doing. Once you develop an app, you have no idea how to improve your app based on user behavior. And also, and just to sound like a broken clock here, but again, these two bookends of threats I see in the Salesforce ecosystem, and we need better ways to deal with it. and Salesforce DevOps can help with both of these, is we need to deal with technical debt and we need the alignment. The reason why DevOps can help with alignment is it starts us doing a basic thing, which is to be able to measure ourselves so that we can compare those to enterprise KPIs. I think that's, Paul, if you're looking for maybe a little insight there, that's what I would focus on. Okay, now here's something I did today. Hope to share with you. I was thinking about this. And when should somebody spend money on Salesforce DevOps? So I think it's definitely tied to how much money you're spending on your license. And let's think about this a little differently. Like what I've got here is on the left side is how much you're spending on your license. And on the right side is essentially the percentage of your license that you're spending on more software and more services to go with your system. So like you're buying Oda Seva, or you're buying Own Backup to do backups, or you're buying some sort of sales enablement package, or you've bought an ERP or one of these big app exchange packages. So I think when you're going up this stack here, I don't see DevOps being a necessity until the ratio approaches 1, honestly. I think, and of course I was listing all the virtues of DevOps, and lots of people who aren't that big are gonna do DevOps and they're gonna benefit from it. And I think that those people are probably at that 0.25 threshold, honestly. So I think if you're below that and you're thinking about spending money on DevOps, it might be questionable. How's that, Paul?
I'm on mute, but I love that. I love it when somebody takes a stab at trying to actually put math to everything that everybody wants to call. I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of science that makes it look like an art, or maybe closer to magic. But that is fantastic. I am stealing that slide and keeping that in my back pocket.
Yeah, I think that's useful. I think basically if you're a you're a global company, you got to have DevOps because you got hundreds of developers, or you got more than 15,000 users or something like that. I think that if it's even I think that there are free tools. So, if you're at the very bottom of that thing, let's take a whack at DevOps Center. It might work for you.
Yeah, in my head, I was trying to build a slide, a staffing model slide of, okay, you don't need, you've got to have a developer. You've got to have one developer. You don't need a project manager without a developer. You don't need a solution architect without a developer. You need somebody that the solution architect may be project managing and may be the developer, but that core skill that the other can't have is somebody who can deliver function. And then as you start to scale the pyramid, the base of the pyramid fills out. Hey, I've got 3 developers. Well, I should probably have a solution architect keeping them aligned. And well, I've got 5 developers, probably have a project manager. And well, I've got 4 teams of 5 developers. Okay, now you've hit that DevOps threshold, and you need to get that there. And it's not the number of developers, it's the number of independent streams possibly causing crossover. And I'm just trying to formulate a heuristic real time here, but that's.
Yeah, because I think you're addressing sprawl with that formula. Because I think sprawl's a big concern. If you fork off your knowledge and people are doing different things, and that can lead to cost. I mean, like I think somebody's got cases of Gearset and Capato in the same giant company, for example. Things like that. I think you could that's where you need, and also you need. I think another key thing about DevOps, if we look at this chart and we realize how big the companies are who are implementing it, is that the center of excellence function to me plays a big role in this too, to kind of either exert the leadership or the control that you need to implement, some sort of unified program.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot, and you can correct me, that my perspective on it, the lens I use is the management of mayhem. A long time ago, I wouldn't let kids around my computer. You hit the wrong sequence of keys, you destroy it. Now, you've got the undo button. I've got backups of everything. I've got minute by minute backups, and we can take my computer in the pool. I don't need the backup strategy. The amount of mayhem somebody can cause is an entirely different animal and can shift. If you've got infinite backups or you've got one developer working on an isolated org, there's not a whole, you can't find the format partition button inside of Salesforce. So
Yeah.
our DevOps rigor should scale to what the threat of mayhem is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love to see, is that kind of constantly, if you buy own backup, you should be able to move to CI/CD faster because you've got an undo button. Hypothetically, you can put fewer PMDs in there because you can instantly roll back, and you can change your time to market strategy based on your holistic scenario, and not just, no, we have to go through 14 steps of Azure Dev release management and change set validation and screening. No, you don't. You did if you put the wrong program on your mainframe, you could delete the whole thing, but it's a different world now. So it's those habits versus the adapted processes based on your situation is what I like to see, those feedback and telemetry change and readapt the process. So sorry, didn't mean to cut into your.
Please do. I think the other thing that this chart I thought was interesting is that, it's just me, it's a little bit of ivory tower stuff here, me making these numbers up. But I did do some research, and I think that if you're in the license spend category, these are guidelines as to whether you're managing your org right with ancillary software. If you're not spending almost as much on your own backup and Capado and all that stuff, if you're a $5 million spend, then maybe there's a problem.
Cool. Thank you. This is great. I love, it's a good salient perspective.
Yeah, I think it quantifies it. Yeah. Somebody else? Okay, we're moving on. So we're kind of near the end of my pitch here. That was the big finale. I think we're looking at the vendors expanding their portfolios to kind of move up the stack. Like I mentioned, it might be a slow crawl, but eventually there should be value stream management even in products like GearSet. By the way, if you're thinking about that stuff right now, I'd be looking at Capado and Opsera. They have solutions that do that value stream. This is mission. It's more like a clarion call for need. I wish I had the answers, Paul, but we need better IT alignment. I think part of the mission is for industry educators like myself to just be simply stating the need for it, to be calling out the traditional tools, value stream management that we can use to kind of bring this idea to bear, and that hopefully we can look at the innovation to make that better in the future. Here's another interesting provision. I guess if we're recording this is interesting for me to say, but I think the generative AI thing is definitely going to be huge in DevOps. I think there's two main areas. I think one is general developer productivity. Anybody who's used ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot probably has had that 10x feeling, if only to solve problems, like to get bugs fixed and to go through error messages and so forth. So I think that's going to be a big area. But I think So working in Salesforce languages and so forth, I think that that's obviously huge and it's part of the development DevOps process. The other thing is that I think you're going to be looking at platforms like Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions specifically, and maybe even Jenkins if you're still using it, or some other, very flexible CI/CD engine scripting capability. That seems like prime territory for generative AI to have a big impact to me. So that if you're depending on a DevOps company to kind of run your pipelines, maybe you won't need them to generate your pipelines in the future. But this is where generative AI, I think, it's really useful, I found, in system integration tasks, where you're able to bring in different resources and invoke them in long running sequences to generate that kind of script that understands all the different APIs, and you can teach it things. And I think, when I'm using generative AI and software engineering, by the way, I'm not that concerned about the hallucination and the error problems, because there's like two levels of checking. One is, you got an engineer looking at the stuff before he puts it in his IDE, and then you got to compile it and test it, and just like every other code that you create. So I think there's multiple levels of safety checks there. So that's my opinion on the future of DevOps. I think it's actually kind of wide open right now. We should look for disruption because of the generative AI thing. And I think that's what I would encourage people to do. If you're thinking about doing DevOps on your own, I would be looking at, generating Azure DevOps scripts, or if you use that, or GitHub Copilot, or GitHub Actions rather, which are easy to generate the SFDX based scripts in that area. So I think that's where the future of DevOps is right now. We're actually kind of going to go into a cycle where people are going to figure out what the Gen AI impact is going to be.
We were talking about being old earlier, and an analogy comes to mind. Somebody had asked me about, is AI going to make developers obsolete? And I would compare it to the lack of fear that we had. I was one that used to have to write down my code to save it. And if I wanted to run again, I had to type it back in. And then all of a sudden, this disruptor came out of copy and paste. And you could just copy existing code and paste it back in without having to retype it. And maybe that would replace the need for most of the developers to do all the typing. And now developers are just really good at copy and paste. ChatGPT will be another tool that we use for the future and wield it that way. We just have to adapt how we do it and incorporate Control-C, Control-V, and not Command-C and Command-V into our work streams, and make use of those tools and just become different developers with that tool set.
So that's it, gang. I had fun with this. I really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of do that that table. That table, I think, has got a lot of insight in it.
Yeah, and I think we've had a couple people holding questions till the end. So.
Oh, okay. I don't look at the Q&A because I'm too busy pitching. But
I have a question posted in the QA, but we've got live questions here. Do we have microphone? Hold on, let's.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yep.
Hi, Vernon. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Well, thank you for that presentation. So I have a question when it comes to how many release engineers should you need? I mean, I'm not talking about like developers or admins. I'm talking about like a dedicated release engineer. Any guidance for like how many people you need per team, anything like that?
Well, I think, again, this is, I mean, I can guess like about a 5 or 6 to 1 ratio. I think it's a function I would try to generalize and have in some sort of service function. What do you think, Paul?
It's one of those things. I loved your slide that did that kind of that ratio, and it's really a hard question to answer. The Nielsen Norman group kind of leaned into, as they were doing building their expertise in the industry on user experience. And everybody, including myself at one time, was like, okay, how many elements should be in a drop-down maximum? And they actually leaned into and have made one of their trademark slogans, "It depends." There's not a pat answer for a lot of this stuff. It depends. There's a lot of heuristics that you need to bring in, a lot of patterns for that. But I love at least starting and trying to say, look, yeah, 6 to 1, 5 to 1. If you've got 5 developers, then maybe you need, or 5 teams, or 5, what have you. How would you break that down? What are the other heuristics that you would use to come up with an answer?
Obviously, org complexity is probably the big one. You know, how many app exchange packages do you use? Are you updating those packages at the source code level or the object level? Are you what other kind of weird things do you have in your org that create strange dependency loops and so forth? I think that to me is the giant. It depends. You know, a release engineer like this is going to be enabled by the digital twin technology we were talking about. So, you know, if you've got that, if you've got a Capado system, you've got other things, then maybe you need fewer release engineers after that point. So I think it is a giant what if, but I'm just trying to kind of go with the 2 pizza crew idea and think maybe about one of those guys should be release engineers.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
That was pretty wishy-washy, but
No. I mean, it's the nature of trying to understand the axes that you make these decisions on. You want to know a pat answer, but the pat answer means you've done 4 or 5 quadratic equations, and you've got to be willing to accept those quadratic. You've got to have the knowledge of the quadratic equation.
that's the approach I try to take. You know, I try to understand what people are doing industry-wide. So.
Yeah, but knowing what questions to ask or knowing what professionals use to do sizing, that's that next step in appreciating, why do I have 35 release engineers? Do I have a complex enough organization that makes that necessary? Or did we go through and simplify something enough that maybe now we can look at simplifying our processes? You know, did we do a big risk mitigation? My own backup analogy, did we do that? And so now the worst thing that can possibly happen is we are down for 30 seconds and we've got 30 people ready to hit that button. That's a waste of money. So as soon as we mitigated this mayhem, we should be able to scale down our processes based on that not being possible to happen anymore. So those are the good key things. Anybody else, or I'll go to my question on Agile. So DevOps practice in Salesforce as you know it, do you have to be good? Because I don't feel like a lot of organizations I've worked in are good at Agile. The old Mad Men philosophy still lives in a lot of the corporations I worked in before consulting, that everybody was looking for promotion by waiting for somebody else's department to slip up. And they had the blame culture in an organization, to me, is the kryptonite to Agile. You have to fail early and often, and it's how fast you learn, not how many mistakes you make. That should be what the sign of a good Agile team. Does DevOps need to follow good Agile process, or is DevOps good for waterfall?
Oh, well, I think that, so here's my perspective on that, is I think that DevOps is built on the shoulders of giants, and one of those giants is definitely Agile. I think the first major management wave that happened was in the 90s, where we looked at what was going on with the Toyota Kata and basically transitioned that to software. So if you're not aware, that's the lean software movement is where we got this idea about a Kanban board and all of these Japanese worded techniques that we use to do management today. And then I think that what built upon that was the Agile philosophy and this idea of breaking waterfall and then talking to your users and having a high iteration cycle and knowing your users and things like that. Is Yes, absolutely. I think that that is a key development philosophy that's necessary for good DevOps. And then DevOps came after that as to kind of build on that. You know, the developers were frustrated they couldn't talk to the operations people, and then, you know, so we had that union with the word DevOps coming together. And since then, though, the word has taken on a completely different meaning. And you know, people, we could talk about what it really means, like today on the hype cycle. But I think that yes, you definitely need agile mindset and some of the agile processes, specifically the way that we divide up work and the way that we interact with users, with user stories and that type of method, I think is what I saw after the pandemic was that there was kind of like a consensus built around the basic agile framework as implemented through Jira. I think that a lot of teams got used to it. A lot of teams started to adopt it, and there's a certain amount of industry knowledge associated with that. So the realm, I think, is still for consultants like yourself, Paul, to figure out what kind of organizational logjams we need to break to actually make that stuff work.
Yeah. For the first time, I am working in an organization that does not have a blame culture, and it has shifted all of my usual assumptions about models and ratios involved with, you know, there's so much manpower spent on CYA that can be repurposed and used more efficiently when you're not dealing with the outcome of a blame culture. And it's really refreshing, and it is a new axis for me. And whenever I'm consulting and trying to do, you know, top process modeling, not for applications, but to build developmental processes based without having those kind of feedback loops. And it's really interesting. It's not without its own challenges, or it's just different challenges. And for me, it's a political one that drops away, and then the more technical ones rise up and become more higher priority. And that's where I want to live. I want to live in solving technical challenges and not teaching people to make technology decisions based on social structure within the organization. And it's
Well, you're trying to break Conway's law then.
What's Conway's law? I'm not familiar with that one.
Conway's law is that the data structures of an enterprise adopt to the communication structures of the enterprise.
Okay. That's good. That's going to be a Wikipedia hole that I fall down one of these weekends. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the thing I like what you were talking about there, Paul, and part of my motivation for doing what I do is that I've been exposed to, you know, startup companies and a lot of that kind of stuff here in the Bay Area, and I think there's a lot of the product-led growth mentality that we experience here in Silicon Valley that kind of like builds in a lot of the motivation for doing what you're doing into kind of this, you know, you're working on a product, you're working in a team that's building part of a thing that's a product. And I think that kind of mentality, I hope is being instilled out there in corporate culture, where what you're doing is that you're creating a digital product in Salesforce that's got a job to do, and that you can understand, you know, what that job is, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to be able to tell if people are happy with it. You know, just like a basic example is to be able to create an internal intranet in your business, and you know that you can actually tie an NPS score, you know, a net promoter score, whether somebody would recommend working at your own company, if you could improve that through better HR technology. I mean, that's the kind of examples that I wish we had more of. And I think that that's what the product-led growth philosophy that comes out of Silicon Valley would be useful in corporate cultures that are more open-minded.
I just as a foil to my own argument, that my other Yoda, Jacob Nielsen, brought up, and his perspective on Agile was one, it was one of the worst things to happen to UX in a long time. And two, that it was designed to keep development teams moving in a lack of vision. If I write a piece of code, if there's nobody driving, doesn't have a vision of the end product, or an appropriate vision, or not, you're not able to attach to a big waterfall vision, I can write a bunch of code, and the bugs from my code will give me more work to do, and you can continue that water wheel of building your own things until such time that new ideas are injected in that create new bugs and that come back. And they kind of combine the support model and the development model into a perpetual motion machine that could operate, and dev teams could continue to run and gradually build garbage, one piece of spaghetti at a time, and that you needed to that decoupled it from vision and direction and just let the engine run without fuel in it, or however you want to extend the analogy further. But thoughts?
Those comments kind of remind me. What was I saying? I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but just in the, I still
Oh
wonder.
yeah, no. I've heard those comments associated with Scrum. So maybe Scrum isn't the best thing to be doing.
Okay.
But that can lead to some tail chasing. But I think the management structures that are introduced through Agile are useful.
Okay. Yeah, I may not know Agile and Scrum well enough to be able to distinguish them. They're kind of intermixed in my head.
No, but Scrum can put you on a little bit of a hamster wheel, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Hamster wheel was the term the analogy I was looking for inside of my analogy that's inside of any other all the other analogies. So obfuscate it as much as possible. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody online? Feel free to pop up. I don't know why those
Bad
windows
Scrum
are
equals
open on
hamster wheel. Okay, cool.
there. Yeah, that's a good note to end on. All right.
Just
So,
wanted to
well,
let you know.
oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Pratik.
That's okay. I just wanted to let you know that I work in Scrum and Agile day in, day out for many years, and it helps me a lot working in Scrum, using Scrum and Agile. I mean, I work with big team members back in India and in US, and it helps me a lot. But it's not Salesforce. Just wanted to let you know it's not Salesforce development that I do, but something else, some other infra-related work. But it helps me a lot.
The Scrum process or the Agile process?
Both Scrum and Agile. I mean, both are interrelated. So I have sprints. I have a Scrum master and who looks up on what needs to be delivered for that sprint, how much we are progressing, how we are progressing, and what is delivered. So like you said, I know I have worked in waterfall also. Waterfall is that I understand what you're saying about that wheel that you keep doing, but small things, very small things get done and can be tested. And we use GitLab for our DevOps and all that. So we use DevOps, we use GitLab. So we create branches and we test it out in all our lower environments before going to prod. That is what I do actually every day. So it helps a lot. Not in Salesforce again.
Those are the ceremonies and the structures to deal with projects through Agile and Scrum are fantastic. But the parts that the blame culture, if you are averse to finding out that you did something wrong, then you can't do Agile or Scrum. The key part is when you deliver something to get telemetry and learn from that. So if you set up an Agile model and you don't have any feedback from your users, you're not doing Agile because you don't have that telemetry that should drive the direction of the next set of things that you do. It's supposed to be about, iterate, learn, and change direction. So you have to have direction in order to change direction. You have to have telemetry in order to understand if you're on the right path or not. Otherwise, it is just a hamster wheel. So that's what I'm talking about, more big picture. But yeah, done properly with those things on the front end and the tail end, it's fantastic. But you can't have either of those be a gap and be successful with it. Otherwise, you are just full on hamster wheeling. And yeah, we're going to verb the heck out of that thing.
Thank you, Paul.
Go.
Thank you, Vernon. It
Bike
was a very
shedding.
nice presentation.
Bike shedding, my other favorite term that turned into a verb that's a little bit out of use now. And there's a rule on that one too, that the amount of time spent discussing something is inversely related to the value of the project. And that was from the example there is when they were discussing the nuclear, the Manhattan Project. They noted in a meeting that they spent more time discussing what color the bike shed should be outside of the building than they did on safety procedures inside of the nuclear program. And so I think that's where that term evolved from, that it's called bike shedding, of just spending times on inane things when other things are much more important, but for whatever reason, they don't generate discussion or what have you. Interesting Wikipedia read.
That's a common corporate activity, I believe.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that's the motto. But all right, well, thank you. If nobody else has any questions, we'll close off. Thank you very much, Vernon. That was an excellent discussion and presentation.
Thank you, everybody, for the invitation. I enjoyed creating that knowledge about the thing about the license spend. I gave you my contact. You can contact me. I'll be sure to email anybody the pitch from tonight.
Yep, salesforcedevops.net. So check it
That's
out.
right.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.